Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and welcome to one of our talks today. Today, we are joined by the wonderful Mitchell Hoog to talk all about Peacock's Saved by the Bell. And I wanted to start by diving back to when you first auditioned for the show, because obviously you went through several rounds of auditions, you then had callbacks, and then you had screen tests at various stages. And I was just interested in whether it was the same moment, the same scenes that you were working with in every single one of those auditions, and kind of how you really worked to just continue finding different layers and textures and moments within each audition that you kept stepping back into to find something new with this character.
Completely. Great question, first of all. I auditioned in Atlanta, actually, and then the Atlanta office contacted the LA office because they were doing like a nationwide search. And so auditioned in Atlanta, and then they brought me in for a callback in LA, and it was sides that I did for the original audition. And then about 2 weeks went by, and I didn't think I got it. And then I got a call, and they were like, they want you to come camera test. And so I went in. It was me and four other kids who probably don't like me because I'm very particular about when I go into a room. And it was this probably like 10 by 10 room with a bunch of chairs. And I walk in, sign the waiver. I have my headphones in, and I went and sat in the hall and didn't say a word to any of them. So if they're saying this, I'm sorry. Because they were all like glaring at me, and I was like, okay. And then went in, camera tested, and then it was down to two of us, and they gave us different sides. And when it comes to kind of finding layers of a character or a part of myself, every side is kind of a different set of circumstances that you can explore and kind of dive into with your imagination. And so the first one was with Daisy, I want to say. Then the second set of sides was my dad. And so both of those kind of gave me kind of the old school version and what I want this new school to be. So it's actually a lot of fun. The sides were a lot of fun. And funny thing is I forgot one of my lines in the second camera test because they brought us in 2 days in a row. And I said something, and it must have been right. I still don't know to this day if it was right. I should probably ask like Elizabeth or Franco. But I just came out, and it worked perfectly. So, and then I got the call. I was on the plane to New Mexico to film another movie. And my agent called me about 2 minutes before I was about to take off and said, "Hey, you got the role." So it was a celebratory plane ride for sure.
Yeah. And once you got the role, I know that you intentionally didn't revisit the original series because you didn't want to create Mac as a direct replica of Zach. You know, it's not the same character, it is a different iteration of the show. And yet there are details of who he is as a person that obviously stem directly from his dad. You know, certain things charisma wise, like the types of pranks that he tries to pull at school. And so was that something where really in the iteration that you've created of him as a character where he still does have certain traits that follow from his father, that at the beginning that very much just came from like Tracy Wickfield and the rest of the writing team and the way that they were putting him on the page and the way that you were imagining him from what they'd conceptualized within the scripts?
Yeah, I think season one, it was very similar to Zach. And the writing was very similar to Zach. And Tracy Wickfield hit it right on the nose with that. And then I think season two, I've kind of gotten to explore kind of the duality of, okay, who is Zach and who is Mac? And how do I relate to people that watch the original and new kids that are watching this? And how can I kind of play both sides of that? And a lot of it was just season two writing there's a lot more heart in me compared to season one. And I think we start to see the kind of the juxtaposition of I want to pull pranks and I want to follow my dad's shoes, but I also am exposed to kind of a new set of beliefs and ideals based on all the new kids in the school. And so kind of blending those two worlds is kind of how I found who Mac is compared to Zach. And I never revisited the original.
And with the influence that the new students have on him, do you feel like particularly because of his friendship now with Daisy at this point, that you're almost looking at Hiskiri's character and really kind of looking at some of the traits from her that are gradually seeping into him? Because it's also interesting to see how sometimes it's moments where he doesn't even want everybody to know. Like when he comes and plays like the mixtape of Do the Thing That Scares You in the background, it's like nobody knows that he's doing something like that, but he does really want to kind of try and elevate people around him in a different way this season.
Yeah, I think I got I get checked a lot on what I do and kind of my white privilege side of it by that whole friend group. And I feel like season 2, I've gotten to kind of trust myself more. And the pranks that I do pull now, I'm doing them for better reasons. They're still pranks and they're still, you know, ridiculous in so many different ways, but it's for better reasons now compared to just messing with people's psyche.
And is there a bit of a balance in terms of finding your performance, because you're now playing a character who is becoming more introspective, and it is very clear that he's doing work on himself internally in trying to change certain things about himself, and at the same time you're doing all of that within the space of a comedy, so it has to kind of lead from that place first and foremost as well, tonally. And so is that an interesting balance to have to strike for your performance?
It was season 1, and I think I learned a lot season 1. And Tracy Wakefield and the whole writer's room, there's a certain pace and a certain tone to it that I'd never really done comedy. I'd come from multiple different drama films that I was very unfamiliar with how to even kind of hit the flow and the beats and the tone of it. And they helped me in season 1 a lot and kind of had my back on, okay, this is how this flows, and this, you need to hit this word and this word. And so Daisy can hit this, and then it all flows. In season 2, they definitely trusted me a little bit more, which was a lot of fun because I got to do a little bit more improv and kind of trust myself and see how far I've came. So it's been a process for sure.
Yeah. And has that also been an evolution in your dynamic with all of your castmates and scene partners? You know, you're mentioning doing more improv and just kind of having a little bit more opportunity to play around with different directions and different possibilities within scenes together.
I think there's a comfortability that happens when a bunch of kids get on a show, and it's kind of a lot of our first big leads and first exposure to a spotlight. And there's a certain unity in that, just in general, personally. And then once you add all of us, not really, except Josie, she absolutely is amazing. But all of us hadn't really done comedy. And so all of us coming in, we would all help each other. We would help each other sitting down and kind of breaking down. I would ask Belmont, hey man, I don't exactly know how this flows right here. Can you help me? And then he would have a different idea on it. So it's very, very collaborative. And same thing with the cast and crew. The whole crew, it takes time to get comfortable with the people around me on who I'm filming with and have them trust me on, hey, like Tom, our head of photography, it's like, I might run right here. I don't know. And so now he kind of knows, I don't really know what to expect, but I'm just going to follow you. And those kind of little niche types are a lot of fun and comfortable now.
Yeah. And with the fact that like you were just saying, for you and the rest of the cast, that this was the first time that you were all coming onto a project of this size and coming onto something together, what were some of the early learning curves that you felt like you were all going through together in tandem, where you really had the opportunity to share that experience and some of the challenges together?
The first one was the table read, to be honest. I think all of us sitting we walked into NBC and over at Universal, and my team did not tell me what a table read really is. And I walked in and there was probably like 75 chairs and then the whole square table. And I sat down and I was like, all those chairs won't be filled. And within 10 minutes, all of them were filled. And there's a certain tone that you have to read in a table read to serve the writers so they know what to do when they go back to work. And John Michael Higgins was the one that kind of taught us all that. And I remember walking out of that first table read and all of us looked at each other and we just kind of took a breath and we're like, oh, okay. We understand what we have to do in table reads now. And it's hitting things a little bit harder, playing the joke a little bigger so people know what plays in the room and what gets the laughs. So that was, I think, the biggest learning curve in the beginning. And then once it came to set, it was the exact same thing of, okay, now we got to tone it down. And who has the butt of the joke here? Who's ending the scene? What's the next scene? How can we all help each other out as actors and as characters to kind of get through the day?
Yeah. And with table reads as well, you've talked about how every time you get a script and every time you step into a table read, that there's always moments within Tracy's writing that just really surprise you, and which is fantastic, that there's always new discoveries for you. And so how do you go into table reads now at this point and really utilize that moment and utilize that space to start really figuring out what's the arc and what's the trajectory going to be for Mac within this episode?
So I know some people table reads their first time reading it, where I am very dyslexic. And so I request the script 3 days in advance, and then I kind of go over it so I can give Tracy what she needs in the room. And a lot of it honestly is just Mac is a very present, singular, tunnel vision type guy. I don't exactly see where the next episode is going to go. It's okay, the prank right now, the cause that I'm trying to do right now, what is happening right now. And all of that kind of, I guess, goes into the script when I break it down of I tend to not think about what's happening in episode 3. Do I know what's going to happen? Yes, but I know that I have no other objective than to do what I'm doing and talk to the person in front of me. And that's kind of how I go about this whole series.
Yeah. And when you were coming back in for season 2, kind of what did you feel that the differences were for you in terms of the type of preparation that you started doing before you were walking onto set to shoot that first episode of the season? You know, especially compared to looking back at the first season when you had to do full character development. Like, what were the details that were important for you to figure out?
The details in season 2 for me was definitely my dad. And I think season 1, I touched on it, but season 2, it was really trying to figure out, okay, as an actor and as comedy, because all good comedy is honestly rooted in trauma or drama. And a lot of the trauma that I feel like I kind of dug out of the script was being in the shadow of my dad. So kind of figuring out number one, that, and number two, how to translate that to the writing that Tracy did. And okay, how do I put kind of the drama in it and the comedy in what the work that I've done as an actor, but also hit the flow of the scene. And so season 2, kind of breaking things down, it was a lot of getting the flow of the scene first and kind of getting the pace of it, and then going into what I do as an actor in my imagination.
Yeah. You know, and he really is a character who just like so desperately wants the attention and the love from his dad and is always kind of striving for that first and foremost. Is that for you, no matter what the scene is, something that's always a driving force underneath each scene and moment for him as a character?
Completely. I mean, I'm walking the same halls that he did. You know, everybody doesn't, I think, see me as Mac. A lot of people still see me as Zach. And so when I walk down the halls, it's how do I make a name for myself? And how do I kind of develop myself so I'm an individual and not just a Morris?
Yeah. And you also didn't get the chance to meet Mark Paul Gosselaar straight off the bat when you first came onto the show because he's obviously a series regular on a whole other series. So I think it was a couple of table reads in before the two of you connected. And once you had the chance to meet him and start working with him on scenes, how for you did that then evolve and layer that relationship even more from what you'd already put together from the initial scripts?
It's such a gift to work with an actor who knows what they want and knows their process. And he's been in the industry for quite some time now, and I'm still trying to figure out my process. You know, I'm throwing noodles at a wall to see what sticks. And to have somebody when I walked onto set that came up to me and introduced himself not as a big actor or, hey, you're stepping in my shoes, just as a human, and sit down with me and say, okay, you know, let's read through this. And then once we got into rehearsals, being very, very serious about, hey, let's go over the steps again. You know, let's go over the marks again. And then kind of giving me pointers of, okay, hey, the lighting's coming in this way and the camera's shooting from this way. So maybe tweak out a little bit, and just being very helpful, not in a, hey, I know what I'm doing more than you, but just in a, hey, let's collaborate and let's help each other. And it was an absolute gift.
And it sounds like overall that the environment with the original cast, all of the original cast members who returned to the show, that really has been the dynamic and that they made a lot of space for you and the rest of the cast in finding out what you wanted this iteration to be, what you wanted your characters to be. And I love something that Mario Lopez was saying to you about, you know, no one project is the singular thing and try not to kind of put all your eggs in one basket, but just focus on the work that you're doing. And did that really help in terms of the way that you were approaching the work, but also just in taking the pressure off in coming into a show that when you first came on board and this reboot was first announced was obviously a hugely anticipated thing that people have a lot of emotional connectivity to already and certain expectations coming into it. So I imagine that there was a lot of pressure when that news was first announced and coming into the first season coming out especially.
Yeah, there's definitely pressure in the beginning, as there is with any project. I think as artists and as actors, you inherently put an amount of pressure on yourself because you want to do a good job. If that's out of validation or whatever that is, it's automatic. And I tend to want to use all of those emotions and those feelings of I feel pressure. I I'm nervous, all of this, and just put it on screen, because Mac feels the same thing, and Mac is me. So if I feel the pressure of a studio on me, okay, let's translate that to the pressure of wanting to live up to my dad. And so I kind of just let it flow through me, and I don't push down anything. And when it comes to the one singular project, that's another blessing that I feel like this whole cast has, is we know we're going to be in the industry 30 years from now. And we know we're going to be, rubbing shoulders on carpets and supporting each other. And so all of us, yes, we talk about the project, but we also talk about, hey, what scripts have you read this week? What are you excited for? What are you working on? What do you want to do next? And all of us have kind of know what we're going to do next and know where we want to go. And it's a lot of fun to all sit in a trailer at lunch and just talk about movies and talk about scripts and talk about what we're watching. Nobody's, I don't think, looking at this as, hey, this is it. We're so grateful for the opportunity, but all of us are excited to explore more of the industry and get to know more people.
I think that's so wonderful to hear in both of those facets, and especially given that, with the space that the original cast members made for you on set, how in turn do you think about the space that you're then creating for people who are coming onto the show, especially at this point? They're looking to you as kind of the seasoned professional on set and the person who knows all the things, whether it's someone who's coming in as a recurring character or whether it's someone who's just coming in for a day and a singular scene or a couple of lines with you.
It's always open arms. The crew, the cast, everybody. It's a very family-based set, and I know a lot of people say that, but this one I feel like is a little different because of the history of the show. And a lot of our crew worked on the original, and it's the same team, and so everybody kind of has this open arms type thing. So when we have somebody new come on, like Matt, who plays Gil, came on this year, and pull up a chair, let's talk. It's a very fun set, and there's no tension in anybody, and it's very fluid.
And you were bringing up earlier how this is kind of one of your first time stepping into comedy, but also this is kind of the first opportunity to step into a character, for 2 seasons and to really spend that much time with them and get to evolve them in so many different ways over so many episodes. And so how do you feel that you have crafted a completely different type of relationship with your character on this show as opposed to other projects that you've worked on before?
Time. I am I sit in scripts, and I love digging in the writing, especially when it's good writing like this show is, where you can really dig and find different things. And as an actor, I think one of my favorite parts is that you make the world that you live in, and you can create whatever circumstance you want in your mind and see how it plays out on screen. Of course, there's limitations, but there's a lot of freedom within that limitation. And having, especially over COVID, having time to really sit in it after being shut down on season 1, and having extra time to kind of be like, okay, here's what I learned in the first 7 episodes. Now, what am I going to do when we go back and shoot these 3? And what can I change? And what can I do better? And just kind of having that growth mentality, I feel like is the biggest thing that is a constant, where usually, you go on set and it's kind of final when you wrap of, I worked on this for 2 weeks or 2 months, and I'm on set for 3 days, and it's a wrap, compared to season 1, season 2, season 3, and you can actually develop as an actor and as a human in general. And I think what I said earlier of kind of using those emotions inside me to go on screen is something that I had to learn through season 1, because I there was times where I was locked up and I was frustrated and all of that, but just take a breath and say, hey, whatever I'm feeling is valid. And on screen, that's what people want to see. So let's just use it.
And with what you were saying before about, thinking about where your career is going to be in the coming years, I know that for you as well, those aspirations also look towards working behind the camera in multiple facets as well. And, it sounds like you're someone who really utilizes your time on set, having conversations with cinematographers, having conversations with directors, really paying attention to what the crew are doing and asking a lot of questions. And so what are the most useful ways for you in which you're really using a lot of your time on camera to really develop yourself as a future artist behind the camera as well?
So I was actually grateful enough to episode, I want to say it was 6, Katie O'Brien. I got to shadow her this year. So it was the episode where I was light, and thankfully everybody was again open arms of like, number one, confused about why I had a headset on and wasn't my hair wasn't slicked, but I feel like the more you know behind the camera, the more you know in front, and it's such a different way of storytelling that it's something I want to dip my hand into so much because as an actor, it's not instant. You don't quite know what's going to happen. You just have to trust yourself. And there's an uncertainty in it, but there's also something very, very fulfilling about being behind a camera and seeing it right in front of you happen. And you know the feedback right away instead of having to wait till the world sees it. So yeah, I'm over the moon that Katie let me shadow her. And I plan to definitely shadow more directors and just kind of be a sponge when it comes to behind the camera.
That's really fantastic to hear that they've created such an opportunity for you in that way as well. And I'm so excited to see everything that you continue to do, both with the show and with future projects in front of and behind the camera. Thank you so much for talking about all of this, Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you.